What motivates advisors to transition to the RIA model? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is episode number 112. Hi, I'm Brad Wales of Transition to RIA, where I help you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition your practice to the RIA model. If you're not already there, if you start out by heading on over to transitiontoria.com, you can find all of the resources I make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, all kinds of things to help you better understand the model. Again, transitiontoria.com. Okay, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a subject that kind of came to me recently. I was thinking back about way back when to some of the classes I took back in college. I ended up getting my MBA. This was a long time ago. In one of those classes in grad school in that MBA track was a class called organizational behavior. And the reason I remember it all these years later is because that was the class I absolutely disliked. I dreaded going to it every time I had to walk in because I just thought it was this touchy-feely topic about how people interact and how people work. And I was much more excited by the economics classes, the accounting classes, the finance classes. And here was this required organizational behavior class. And perhaps like a lot of things in life, as the years passed after I graduated and I got older and wiser, it began to occur to me, and this is why this has stayed with me all these years, is that was arguably the most important class I had out of all of the classes. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the finance people think or the accounting people think or the economics people think. If you are trying to run a business, trying to run a practice, trying to run a family, whatever it is in life, everything comes back to what motivates people. And that's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode. So that organizational behavior really structured around what motivates people to do things in life. Again, whether that's your kids that you're hoping to motivate them to maybe make good decisions on things, that's your team members, your staff, that you hope to motivate them to do certain things. It's what motivates you to do things in life, to take steps on a personal level or professional level. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is what motivates advisors to transition their practice to the RIA model. And that's typically what I start when advisors and teams reach out to me. I encourage you to do the same. Happy to have this conversation with you. But when advisors and teams reach out to me, we set time, we jump on a call or a Zoom together. I typically start those conversations by saying, what has motivated someone like you to be reaching out to someone like me? Because that really drives at what has caused that advisor, that team to take the step to say, hey, I might want to explore this RIA model. This might be for me. Let me start learning more about this. And obviously I help advisors, everything on that front end for the education piece, to all the steps involved to get you to the other side if it makes sense to do it. But what is that motivation? And so I love asking that question because I love hearing back from the advisors, the teams, of what those motivations are. And no matter how it is articulated, and I've asked this question hundreds and hundreds of times, no matter how it is articulated back, those answers generally fall into two main buckets. That's what we're going to be covering on this episode. Those two buckets are a desire for more flexibility with their practice, and a motivation to achieve the better economics that come with the model as well. So what we're going to dive into here is those two buckets: more flexibility, better economics. I'm going to give you some examples of both of those. These are not all exhaustive lists of every imaginable item that kind of falls into this, but to give you an idea of what are some of those main motivations, and you are probably going to relate to many, if not most of those, but they'll give you an idea of kind of what those things are. So we'll start with flexibility, which coincidentally, this is usually what advisors lead with when I ask that question. They don't necessarily come out first with the economic piece. And I don't know if that's because flexibility is a bigger driver, or just no one wants to necessarily come out and say, oh, I want to make more money, and I know I can do that in the RIA model, or I believe I can do that in the RIA model. Either way, it typically is the flexibility piece that comes out first. So we'll start with that as well, but then we'll move on to economics. So to give you some examples, again, and no not an exhaustive list in no particular order, some of those variables of what advisors are seeking. So the first one is greater control over the investment solutions you can offer your clients. So depending on what type of firm you're at, you are likely in a situation where your firm has gone out into the marketplace and decided what even mutual funds you're allowed to use, what money managers you're allowed to use, those sorts of things. And you have to work within that universe of solutions. Now, to their credit, if you're at a reputable firm, they've probably done some good due diligence and they feel that those are good solutions. So it's not that you have a bad set of solutions, but you almost assuredly don't have as expansive as a set of solutions as is available in the marketplace because your firm has narrowed that field for you. There's a couple of reasons they've narrowed that field. It generally comes down to their ability to essentially supervise your activities and feel comfortable with how you're investing the client's assets and the economics involved for them. And so I'll give you an example. I won't name the firm. It's a very large, well-known firm, and I don't believe they've changed this policy, but it goes back a couple of years ago. They came out and they said, hey, advisors at our firm, you can no longer use Vanguard mutual funds. Now, to their credit, they still have Vanguard ETFs, but you can no longer use Vanguard mutual funds. And they came out with this word salad nonsense explanation about how we looked at all the mutual funds in the marketplace and we helped our advisors out by narrowing that field down, and here's the subset of mutual funds that they can use, and just Vanguard just didn't make the cut, is basically what they were saying. That's 100% crap, just to put it bluntly. The reason they did it is because if you're not familiar, I've done episodes on the economics of how firms make money. It is a typical arrangement with mutual funds, whether it's at a broker-dealer or custodian, that there's something called revenue share that depends on how much assets are invested in a firm's funds. Those mutual fund companies will pay, often referred to as revenue share, back to the platform, the broker-dealer, the custodian. There's nothing shady about that. That's how the industry operates. But as an example, Vanguard is one of the few mutual funds that does not pay any revenue share back to firms. And so in this case, this large firm tried to come up with some nonsense explanation about why they were excluded, when in reality, they just wanted to make more money by forcing their advisors into mutual funds that do pay them revenue share, not this Vanguard. So it's kind of a unique example, but it gives you a taste of where advisors say, hey, I don't want to be able to look just at what my firm allows me to use. I want to look at the universe of options. So investment solutions, more expansive investment solutions is an example. Next example on a flexibility front is to be able to expand the services you want to be able to offer to your clients. So this, I'll give you an example. This may or may not apply to you, but some advisors say, hey, I want to be able to offer perhaps doing tax planning or tax returns in-house. We're going to build out a team. We think that's a good value add for clients. It makes it more cohesive. That's what clients want, is to do it under one roof. In most firms, particularly if you're a large firm, large wirehouse firm, there's no chance you can do that sort of thing. You certainly have to even give the byline. This is not tax advice, even though you just explain some tax consequence to someone about their IRA account. And you certainly can't do tax returns for someone. Again, you might not have a desire to do that, but it is the reason I pointed out is, are there services that you would like to do for your clients, that you feel there's demand for you from your clients, that you feel it would help you attract more clients, but you're not able to do it now because your firm won't allow you to do it? The question is, can you do that in the RIA space? And again, that's a big part of the conversation I'm having with advisors. Hey, if I were to make that move, could I offer those tax services to clients? And that's the sort of thing we talk to. And in almost every instance, there will be more flexibility in the RIA model for the kind of services you want to offer your clients. The next example on a flexibility front is the access to more technology solutions. The RIA ecosystem now has hundreds of technology vendors out there supporting advisors with different tools and things you can use. If you're at a large traditional broker-dealer firm, wirehouse type firm, you're not only kind of provided with, often required to only use the technology they provide for you. Now, make no mistake, they spend a lot of money, they invest a lot of money to try to make that good technology, but the world has evolved to the point where there are now, like I said, hundreds of different technology solutions you could use, and yet you likely don't have access to even a fraction of those, depending on the type of firm you're at. And the one example, and it's a simple example, but that I always like using on this, is something as simple as Calendly, and there's other versions of it, but Calendly where you can send to a client or a prospective client, or your team member can send to them just a link. So let's say the client wants to have a meeting with you, a call with you, whatever, and as opposed to going back and forth and all this nonsense, it's just so much easier to say, hey, if it's easier for you, client, let me send you a schedule link. You can click on that. You can instantly see all the times that are available. You pick one, go ahead and sign up right then and there. None of this back and forth by email or phone and voicemail and all this stuff. That's just normal routine technology nowadays. But yet many advisors still can't use something as simple as that because their firm is not comfortable with the technology or having it integrated into their system. And that just blows my mind. You are at a competitive disadvantage when you cannot do even simple stuff like that makes things easier for you, for sure, but also for your clients and prospective clients. There is a demand. That is going to be there. That tool is not going away. And if you can't do something as simple as that, let alone all the other different things you might want to add on, it's something you need to be considering. So that, again, is a motivation. Advisors want more access to all the technology solutions that are out there. Next, from a flexibility standpoint, is how you can charge for your services. So most of you, as is the case in the RA model as well, most advisors are charging their fee on an AUM percentage basis, which is the pretty standard fee by far if you're at a broker deal, but you're on the RIA side of the broker deal, you're wearing your advisory hat, or in the RIA model is that AUM fee approach. However, there is increase in utilization and interest by advisors in expanding how they can charge clients. And so that might be because you've added other services like I talked about earlier, or you want to add services. And so how can you best charge for that? And so doing things like whether you want to be able to charge a flat fee for helping with something. I know of an advisor that charges, he helps people kind of going through a divorce situation, and he'll just charge a flat fee for a lot of the work that goes into that. And then from there on after, if that then person becomes a full-time client, they then do an AUM fee. But for that upfront kind of all the detailed legwork, due diligence, kind of discovery process, they charge a flat fee for that. You want to be able to have the option to do something like that. Other advisors are also introducing hourly fees or subscription fees. So that's another motivation advisors want, is the flexibility with how they charge for their services. The next example of the flexibility front is, and this is a big one in my opinion, is how you can brand and market your practice. So when you go out in there in the marketplace, particularly if you're trying to focus on a particular niche out there, how are you able to get that message out there? What brand are you able to build? What marketing approaches are you able to utilize? Are you able to have a custom website that is branded with all of your material? Are you able to have your own custom blog? Are you able to have a podcast if that's something you want to do? Are you able to make videos like I do? That is something that you're going to have far more flexibility. It depends on where you are now, but in most instances, if you're a large broker-dealer firm, you're going to have far more flexibility in the RIA model of how you can brand and market your services in the marketplace. And then the final, again, non-exhaustive list on the flexibility front is that desire almost all advisors have to not be managed to the lowest common denominator of compliance. So you've likely heard of this before. The idea being that if you are at a firm with 10,000 plus advisors, just to give an example, that firm has a responsibility to make sure those 10,000 advisors are following the rules and regulations of the industry. And unfortunately, in any industry, in any sort of scenario, when you have 10,000 people together, you are going to have some bad apples in there. And so they have to put guardrails in place to manage those advisors because they don't know ahead of time who the bad apples are. Now, some firms, particularly independent type firms, are arguably much better at doing this and allowing more independence and freedom by the advisor. But you absolutely see it at the large firms, the wirehouse firms, this managing to the lowest common denominator, meaning it doesn't matter how many years you've been an advisor, how experienced you are, how clean your record is, you get managed to the lowest common denominator, the knucklehead that they know is out there. They just don't know who it is. So they have to put tighter guardrails on everyone because they don't know who it is, and you get caught up in that. So that's another thing that advisors are motivated by is I don't want to be managed to the lowest common denominator of my firm because of no fault of my own. In the RIA space, you have much more flexibility on that front, not have to be kind of as tight guardrails as you likely have now. So that's on the flexibility front. Again, not an all-exhaustive list or not an exhaustive list. On the economics front, just to go through some of these, and I've done several episodes on some of these topics, so I'm just going to do them high level here. But the first one is just a higher income. So it depends on what kind of model you are at now. Part of the discovery process of should you be looking into the RIA models to say, okay, what do your economics look like now? What would they look like over here in the RIA space? There's all different ways to transition into the RIA model that I talk about frequently on episodes. And so you understand, okay, which model is best for you? And then how would those economics, how would that income compare to what you have now? In most cases, it is almost always higher on the RIA side. For some of you, it will be meaningfully higher on the RIA side. Now, I don't want to oversell that because, as I talk about often, there's additional responsibilities that come with having that higher income than you possibly have now if you're at a W-2 type arrangement. So it's not just, all upside without some additional responsibilities to go with it. I don't want to give that impression. But generally, part of this exercise is to say, okay, for the increase in income, which again, for some of you could be substantial, are you willing to take on, and part of what I help advise with is, okay, here are the additional responsibilities you would have. Are you willing to take on those additional responsibilities and you will be compensated with X is essentially more than you're making now? Is that something you're interested in exploring further? So something certainly considers that higher income. That's what motivates advisors. Another example in the economics front is advisors want more control over their so-called local expenses. So if you are your own RIA or you are an RIA with you've joined an RIA and you're on a 1099 arrangement, you have much more control over your local expenses. And that's important because that's what will in large part drive your bottom line. So depends on how extravagant of an office you want or do not want. Depends on how large or small of a staff you want. Or all the different things that go into kind of running that local footprint, how you're positioning yourself in the marketplace. You have, in that RIA space, you have control over that, and you only have to pay for things you desire and things you want to have. If you are at, again, I keep harping on, but a large broker-dealer firm and you're getting that traditional W-2 payout, you are paying, because it's the inverse of your payout, you are paying for an office, you are paying for team members, you're paying for technology. But you don't get an itemized bill to show you exactly what you're paying for each of those, and you have no control over that. Then maybe you're not utilizing the fancy office they're giving you as much as needed, and maybe there's actually even a more convenient location for you and your clients elsewhere that actually would be cheaper than what you're essentially de facto paying as part of your inverse of your payout. So the more you can control your expenses, the more you can drive your income because you can decide exactly what is important to you or not. You can go out there and say, okay, what are the different cost options and choose what's best for you and be able to drive your P&L, drive your bottom line income. The next example, I did an episode on this a couple episodes back. I encourage you to go look at it. I'm a big proponent of this. It's not possible for all advisors because maybe the type of city you're in, it's not necessarily always feasible to do as part of a transition. Maybe it's kind of a next phase, but is the ability to potentially own the building that your office is in. So own the office as opposed to necessarily lease in, potentially own in the building that you're in. Again, I did a separate episode on this from the real estate advantages of the RIA model. And the very short of that, again, because I did a whole episode, is that can be a substantial additional wealth builder over the balance of your career, as if you have, let's say, 20 years left in your career, as opposed to essentially paying someone else in the W-2 world. You are paying for real estate now. You just don't get that itemized bill. It's part of the inverse of your payout. In the RA space, if you could own the building that you're in, you're going to have a real estate expense no matter which path you go down, unless you do a fully virtual, which is another flexibility option in the RA space. But you might as well be acquiring an asset over those 20 years versus just paying someone else. Now, again, there's all kinds of nuances to that. Easier said than done. But you don't even have that option in that W-2 broker-dealer space. You do in the RA space. It can be a substantial wealth builder for some of you. Depends on your circumstances and your runway left in your career. Next up, and we're almost done here, one of the motivators is advisors are seeking the better taxation that comes with the RA space. So being 1099, it is what it is. You have, what fair or not, as an independent business owner, you have far more flexibility to kind of manage your taxation, and the tax benefits are substantially more in your favor than they are the W-2 world. Fair or not, it is what it is. So, for instance, your ability to write off business expenses. Perhaps right now you're able to write off some of that, or there's kind of your branch allocates some money. You could do that, but you're likely spending your own research on things, whether it's your cell phone bill or some travel costs or your marketing that maybe your firm's not reimbursing you for. And all of a sudden over here in your own, in the independent space, you can write generally most all of that off. That saves you on taxes. That's just one example on the tax front, but it is substantial difference generally from that W-2 world to that independent world, that 1099 world, that business owner world from a taxation standpoint. So advisors that are aware of that, that is another big motivator for them as well. And then the final just motivator on the economics front that I'll point out that advisors often seek in, I did a whole episode recently on this as well, so you check it out, is it is what it is. The enterprise value of a practice in the RIA space in almost every circumstances is higher than it is of what you will get if you are at, for instance, a wirehouse firm and you go through their sunset program. Two main variables that are going to be different. One, the valuation you will get for your life's work, for your practice, again, higher in the RIA space in almost every instance than how your current firm will value that. And then also back to the taxation that you can, the taxation treatment you can put when you sell your practice in the RIA space could be substantially more advantageous. Typically, you can get most, not necessarily all, but most of those proceeds as capital gains taxation. Typically, when you're going through one of these sunset programs, that's W-2 personal income tax rates. For some of you, the taxation alone, even if the valuation was the same, which is, again, it's not, even if it was the same, the taxation alone could be potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars difference, if not even larger. So something to think about as well. Again, that's a big motivator. Advisors say, hey, if this is my life's work, I want to maximize the value I can get for it at the end of my career. And not only the top line value, but after taxes, actually how much stays in my pocket. So that's another big motivator for advisors looking from that economics bucket. So to wrap up, again, just to explain the main motivations, it's usually flexibility, economics. Typically, advisors are seeking both of those. That's what I help advisors with understand. How do all these variables work? What are your motivations? Let's make sure your motivations and what you believe will be doable or will be the circumstances in the RIA space are accurate. So let's fact check that, and then we'll say, okay, if that makes sense, then maybe we dig further here and continue down whether going on the RIA path makes sense for you. But we go through all that exercise, and so but at the end of the day, there generally always is going to be more flexibility. There generally always is going to be better economics. But to be clear, just a quick takeaway, as I said a little bit ago, most of you, again, if you're at a wirehouse firm, a regional broker-dealer firm, these new paths with all this wonderful additional flexibility, all these wonderful additional better economics comes with more responsibility. And you need to understand what those additional responsibilities are. Is that something you're able and willing to take on? And do you feel that additional flexibility and economics you will get justifies that additional responsibility? That is part of what I help advisors with. I don't just paint a rosy picture and say, oh, here's all this great stuff here and here's all this great stuff here. It's like, no, you need to understand there are those great things. Here's what also comes with that. Make sure you understand it. Make sure you're comfortable with that. And then to not scare you off on, okay, wow, what are those responsibilities? There's several different ways you could go about doing this. Again, you could potentially start your own RIA, and there are some, as I've talked about in episodes, some wonderful solutions, RIA platforms that you can join that have said, hey, we realize your particular circumstances and desires and motivations, you might not desire to have to put all these pieces together like you traditionally would if you're starting your own RIA. So we've bundled all that up for you with best-in-breed solutions. We have more scale than you'll ever have, all kinds of different value prop items. We've bundled it up. Here's how we price it. We'd love to have you come join our platform. At the same time, you still get, there's better economics and the taxation or all those sorts of things. So just know, and I know I'm just kind of glancing over that, but my point is, don't fear the responsibilities. I will help you understand those responsibilities, and then to the degree you even say, okay, I understand them, I still don't want to do those. In most instances, there's ways you could outsource those to others, and they provide a good offer and a good value prop that could be very appealing to you as well. So with that, like I said, my name is Brad Wales of Transition to RIA, and this is the sort of conversation I have with advisors, again, from how I start that call, what's motivating you to have this conversation. Then we start talking about all these items, and then everything just kind of unfolds from there of understanding what the RIA model would look like, how does it compare to what you have currently, if it makes sense to go down that path, how do you ultimately get from point A you're at now to point B over here. I help advisors understand all of that. Happy to have that conversation with you as well. First things first, though, if you head on over to transitiontoria.com, you can start out by looking at all the resources I make available. This entire series in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, and at the top of every page is a contact link. If you click on that, you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation with me. I'm happy to have that chat with you. Again, transitiontoria.com. And with that, I hope you found value in today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.